Okay, hey guys. Today I'm going to start a brand new series on this channel. It's a little different from the electronics tutorials I've been doing and wanting to get started on. I hope to still do electronics videos about the Arduino and another microcontroller board I recently bought called the Nucleo board, and I have lots of projects I want to do on that front, but right now I want to delve into Android game programming. Now, let me give a little bit of a backstory to this. I've been doing programming for quite some time, and I have experience with Java in the past, and I'd even followed several tutorials on YouTube about doing basic 2D platformer games in Java for the desktop. And I had so much fun making those games, but the problem is no one sits down at a desktop computer to play a simplistic 2D Java game like that, because if someone's going to sit down on their computer for gaming purposes, it's going to more than likely be some graphics intensive 3D game. Maybe not super graphics intensive, but it's going to be a 3D game in nature more than likely. Team Fortress 2, something like that. But when I thought about it, I said, hey, now wait a minute. The programming for Android is done in Java, and unlike Apple, which costs a lot of money to develop, a lot is relative. It costs $100 for a developer account, but you have to have a Mac as well, which I don't have. So the cheapest option would be to really get one used, but that's still not very cheap. As opposed to Android, where you can go on any platform, download their IDE, and start developing immediately. And I have an Android device to test it on, so I figured that was kind of logical. And as far as the games go, let me go back to that after my little sidetrack there. Like I said, no one's going to play a 2D side-scroller Java game on the desktop, but Android apps are written in Java, and so you can use that same Java skills to write games. And I've recently been working on a game called Planet Drift, and I'm not going to tell you too many details about it because it's kind of my little brainchild at the moment, but hopefully I can get that developed and actually released on the Google Play Store. And then once it's released, I may go back and do tutorials covering how I did certain aspects of it, or I may just come up with a different game idea and demonstrate that one. But this Planet Drift, I kind of want to take from concept and actually see if I can produce a game that I can actually put on the Play Store with it, which I believe only costs $30 to become a Google developer that way. So in pretty much all fronts, developing for Android is much easier than developing for Apple, and quite honestly, I actually am liking their ecosystem more and more as I just kind of play with it. I think it's a wonderful community, lots of people willing to help. It's not quite as exclusive as Apple, I feel, and I just think it's a great way to learn programming for mobile. And so I'm going to kind of delve into some games, but at the moment I'm kind of lacking in some of the UI design and coding abilities. Like I said, I've started my game, but game design is an entirely different beast than trying to design an interface, because the game, you take control of the whole screen and you hide all the controls, and everything is being drawn to a canvas, if you will. It's a whole different set of considerations. You have to worry about memory and battery usage and stuff like that, and interacting with sensors a lot more. So it's still really fun, but it's a whole different beast than doing interface design, and I would kind of like to play with interface design. And so I had this idea for doing the series on YouTube here. It's a little non-conventional because most of the series are the person's already has code written, or they already have an idea of what they want to write, and they just kind of write it on screen and explain what they're doing. My idea with this thing is actually to learn with you guys, because I think that'll provide an interesting aspect in that if I find an unforeseen bug, you will see me find that unforeseen bug, and you will see how I work through it, which is something that a lot of my friends who like programming too are always like, how do you learn debugging? And it's not something you really can sit down and watch a video or read a book on how to debug. I mean, there are certain techniques you can use that you can learn, and there are certain techniques that are good to use, and there's certain tools that are phenomenal for debugging, and those are things that you can finitely learn. But the process of just debugging is not something that you can just do. It's something you have to kind of learn. So I think by actually doing this code, all of it on screen, It'll provide an interesting opportunity because I'll get to learn a lot more about interface design. You all will get to learn how to write Android apps properly, following Android's development guides, so it's the way they want it done. It's not going to be a way that works. It's going to be the way to do it. I just think that it'll be an interesting series. So I'm going to start here in this first video with kind of getting started, and then just building our first app and deploying it on my device. And I actually do have it set up so you guys will be able to see my device's screen. This is actually it right here. This is just a screen viewer I'm using, and this device is actually plugged into my computer, and so it will deploy directly and put an icon right there. The reason I'm not using an emulator is because the emulator is terrible. I strongly urge you, do not use the emulator unless it is your only option. Now, if you don't have any sort of Android device and you really want to get into development, okay, you're going to have to use it, but I would go, read some articles about how to optimize it and make it a little faster, because if you just download their SDK and Eclipse and just run the emulator as is, it's going to be terrible and slow, and it's just not going to be a good experience, and you're not going to enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy it, it's not going to be fun to program. Because I tried the emulator before, and it was just frustrating, because I'd write code and deploy to the emulator, and it took like 2 minutes to deploy, and everything was so jittery and jumpy you couldn't effectively see if it was smooth, how the interface looks, stuff like that. So as opposed to if you deploy on a hardware device like that, it's perfectly fine. Now, there is going to be some lag here inherently because I'm doing a screen capture on my Android device, so it's not going to be the smoothest thing ever. So if I kind of go like this, you'll see there's a lag. Okay, so I dragged, and there was a lag between when it moved and when it came back. So animations are not going to be the easiest thing to see on this viewer, but static things, like if I just hit the app button, you'll see it come up as is. So it certainly has its place, but this is what we're going to be using to view the apps for now. If we decide that there's something better later, we may change that, but this is what we have at the moment. Let me minimize out of that. There's basically only a couple tools you need to develop. Basically, if you go to developer.android.com, down here at the bottom there's a Get SDK button. Now, this website will change over time, so if you're watching these videos way in the future, the key here is not going to be following where I click, but just finding where to download the SDK and the IDE, which stands for Integrated Development Environment, and SDK stands for Software Development Kit. So it's basically a big bundle you download that lets you write apps. When you download this, it's going to be a zip file. I've extracted it, and this is what you'll get. If you double click in this, you'll see you have an SDK manager, an SDK folder, which I'm not going to get into at all. These two are used partially for downloading plugins and things like that, as well as setting up your emulator, but I'm not going to get into that for now. Eclipse is what you need. So go into the Eclipse folder, and I just personally appended this right down here on my dock because I'm going to be using it all the time, but this is what you need right here. Eclipse.exe is the editor that will allow you to write code for Android as well as deploy code on your Android device or on the emulator. So let's close out of this, and I just leave this on my desktop. Works for me. So back to the website here. This is something I strongly encourage you to go to and play around with their website. Just click on all the different tabs, see what everything is. Distribute's all about how to monetize your app and produce it, put it on the Play Store. Develop is all about programming your app, and design is all about interface rules kind of that you should follow, things to make your app look consistent with the Android apps and so forth and such. Under Develop, they have training, which is what we're going to be following in this video series. They have API guides and reference kind of go hand in hand, and that's where you can go down and physically view each function and what they do. Google Services tells you how you can interface Google Maps, things like that, into your application. Tools is, of course, the SDK, and there's other tools here as well. Samples is actually some sample code you can look at. But what we're primarily interested in here is training, and you're going to want to go look at this website on your own, like I said. Let me go ahead and open up Eclipse so that can get going in the background. Leave my device minimized for now until we get ready to actually deploy our first app. So the first thing you have to do is make a project. These two folders are not going to be here on your device, or on your window in your program when you first open it. These are here because they're mine. But what you're going to want to do is go File, New, Android Application Project. And the first thing you have to do is give it a name. So we're going to call this training 1. Project name, we just leave that the same. The package name, it's usually recommended you put something here that's unique. I'm going to just put my first name for now. That'll work. But you may want to put first name and last name. This just has to do with where it stores the files for your application on your actual device. So you're going to want it to be pretty unique, but don't think too hard about it. Just kind of make something that works. This has to do with the version of Android your application can run on. So there's been, lots of different versions of Android. The current one is 4.4, and so you see here that's API version 19. There have been many previous releases, and so what you really have to do is pick which one are you shooting for, like what's your goal, and then what's the oldest one it can run on. This shooting for one should really always be the newest one. Just make it the newest one. This minimum SDK, I'm just going to leave it the default for now. We'll talk more about what that means later, but the idea behind that is if you pick an older API version, you're going to lose functionality because the functionality you may want didn't exist in that previous version. But if you pick too new of a version, you may not be supporting as many people as you could. This theme has to do with how the app looks. We're going to leave that default as well for now. We'll get into more about styles later. I would just leave this screen the same. This is just saying yes, give it an icon. This is saying generate some files for me, and this is telling you where it's going to store the project. This is the default icon. Just going to leave that all the same. And this is the layout of your application. Full screen takes over the full screen and gets rid of your back and home buttons. So I'm just going to avoid that one for now because it's a little more specialty. Again, that would be good if you're doing a game or something and needed it to be full screen. Master detail flow is kind of a unique one that we'll cover later, but we're not going to do it now. And you'll actually notice here it requires a minimum SDK version of 11. Now we selected 8. So you see what I'm talking about here is already coming into play, in that when you select a lower version, you will lose certain functionalities. So we can't use this layout. So we'll just go ahead and back and use blank because we want to give a pretty blank template to start with here. Activity name, I'm just going to leave default for now, not give too much thought into that, but you can name something fancy if you want. Again, these you can name whatever you want, but I'm just going to leave them all the same. Navigation has to do with how you swipe through different pages of your app, assuming you will have different pages, which not every app will. Think about like Facebook or something. There's not really different pages. There's just one big column in the middle with all your stuff, and then kind of drawers that slide in from the side to do different things. So not every app will need sliding pages like that, but certain ones do, and so you can pick between different ones here, but we're just going to do none for now. Let's finish that, and then we'll go ahead and create our project. Now, I don't know why their IDE does this, but it kind of puts a little red error there for a second, but if you just give everything a second to kind of fall into place, that error will go away, and there's really no error. It's just their IDE being special. You see now it's gone to exclamation point, and a little bit later it'll go away completely. So you'll see all these folders are generated for us, which is great because it gives us groundwork, a stable foundation to build upon, and 2 files are opened. MainActivity.java, which is a Java file, Java code, and fragment_main.xml, which has to do with laying out the interface. So this is unique because it actually splits up what you see and the code behind, and that's the way these apps are written. So you have a view, which is just purely XML and images and other things, and you can get more fancy with that. There's more to it than just that, but the basic one is just XML files pretty much that define what the view looks like, and then you have your code behind which interacts with those XML files. So this is the default. Let's go back to the website now. Click building your first app, and we're going to skip past creating and running because mine's already set up to run on my device. I'm not going to cover how to do that. The primer, if you want to use a device, is that you need a specific USB driver for that device, and then you pretty much plug it in and hit play, and it'll take a little bit of setup, but it shouldn't be too difficult. As far as running the emulator, that's a little bit more involved, but it will tell you how to do that here if you want to read about it. I'm not going to cover that because it's, quite frankly, it's boring and is pretty easy as long as you follow their instructions. I've already went over how to create the project and what the different options mean, so we're going to jump straight down here to building a simple user interface. Now I've already told you that the way the code is written, it splits up the view and the code behind. As far as the view, there's a little more to it than that. You basically have 2 kinds of things. You have groups that hold a bunch of views, and then you have views that are elements that you actually interact with. And both of these have independent sets of properties and attributes that you can set and change and listen on and do all kinds of stuff. So let's say this view was a text box. There's events you can subscribe to that say, if anyone changes the value of that checkbox, notify me, and it passes you parameters with what those changes were. So it might be the new text, it might be any new value if you're subscribing to an on-change event like that. And of course they have just static properties like width, height, hints, things, all kinds of fancy things you can set on the views that change how it looks like on the screen. View groups tell the layout how those views are arranged. So there might be like a linear layout here is the first example, and it just stacks them one on top of another. Or you can say linear layout horizontal and it stacks them side by side. So this is a very flexible way of doing it, because if you put view groups inside of view groups, as this is showing here, and then you can have views next to view groups in the same hierarchy, if you will, and then you can make as many nested lists here as you want. So you could have 10 view groups inside of each other, all with multiple views, and that allows great flexibility to make really well done layouts that flow nicely for different screen sizes, which is a very important attribute of Android development, because you have tiny phones and then you have huge tablets. This right here is a tablet and it's pretty big screen size, and then you have little phones that are much smaller. So that's a very important aspect as well in terms of making sure your app scales for big and small. So we're going to cover more about that later, but that does affect certain things like here. Like you'll see drawable is basically where you put graphics for your application, and you'll see we have H, L, M, XH, and XXH. And that stands for high density pixel, low density pixel, medium, extra high, and extra extra high. And so that's extra extra high is getting up into the Retina territory. Some of those newer Android tablets that have like something wonderful like 400 pixels per inch, that's going to be XXH. And then an older phone might be MDP. So side effect of that is that a lot of times you have to make graphics of different sizes. We may not be going into that too much here. We may just making a single size in my tutorials that I know works for my tablet and putting it in the corresponding folder. But that's one of those things that in production you will actually have to make 5 different versions of the same image with different sizes. There's also values and here that I want to get into briefly. Styles we'll talk about later, but strings is a pretty important one. Okay, so let's come back over here and come all the way down here to where it says adding string resource. So the way Android handles strings is, instead of hard coding your string into the interface itself, which works but is kind of brute force, it puts these strings in a single code behind file, and then you simply reference that name attribute right here. So instead of saying my first app, you would reference app_name, and it'll put this string wherever you reference this. And that's really powerful for a number of reasons. One, it allows you to change it easily here, and then it changes everywhere where you've referenced this variable, or this ID name, if you will. It's not really a variable, it's just the device knows how to go get the value associated with this key. So think of it like a variable. It also has wonderful side effects for locales. So if you want to make your application work fine in different parts of the world who speak different languages, you can make different string resource files, and it'll automatically pick the resource file depending on the locale set on that person's device. So all of those things are very powerful, but I just wanted to mention that string resource because that's also a pretty important thing to cover at the beginning. After that, I'm going to skip all this other message box stuff and go back up to the top here. So the first thing I want us to do is create a linear layout. The default layout they've given us here, if we come over to the XML file, is actually it's a relative layout. Now you'll see over here that you're seeing the code behind. So this is an interface view. You can actually drag stuff and drop it on, which is okay. It works sometimes for just getting the elements there, but for really fine control, you should go click on this tab right here, and it'll give you all the code that represents what you're seeing here. And this is a lot greater detail because you're not guessing, oh, I think that's 100 pixels. You can come in here and actually determine the exact specifications. So you'll see here we have a relative layout, which is fine, but we're going to change it to linear layout in a second. But first, I want to just deploy this app and getting it running on my device. So let's go, if I just click play and do Android application, it will run on my device. And if I come over here and click on this, we'll see it open up in a second. Maybe, did I click deploy? Oh, okay. So it's actually asking me where I want to deploy it to. So this is where if you had a virtual device, you could deploy it to that. I'm going to pick my Samsung device here and say use future device for this instance and hit OK. Now it should go ahead and deploy right on this screen right here. Okay, it just opened up. Okay, so you're seeing, the first thing you'll notice is it's an incredibly blank, boring screen that just crashed. That's wonderful. Okay, I have to figure out why that happened. Let's come back over here. So it didn't like something. Interesting. Okay. Now I wonder if this screen viewer is causing issues because I've never used this screen viewer before. Let me try one more time and we'll just see what happens. Okay, it's still looking fine. Okay, it's working this time. I don't know why it... Oh, I see. As soon as I click on this tab, it crashes. Okay, so apparently this viewer is not working out the way I wanted it to. So for the next tutorial, I'm going to have to come up with a better solution than that. But for the time being, we'll just have to rest assured that it does come up and show pretty much exactly what you see here. It's just a black bar with the word training 1 and the little icon and the word hello world. And if you were to have gone back out to the home screen, you would also see that it put that icon on your home screen there, and you can actually run the application repeatedly on your device. I mean, once you deploy it, it's there. Which is personally another thing I love about Android development, because if you develop for iOS, you have a specific developer account, and if you want to deploy your app on any devices, those devices need to be linked to that account. So let's say you had, let's say you wrote an app that you thought was the best game ever, well, it was the best game ever, and you wanted to sell it for $1, but then you didn't really want to make your family pay for it. That would be kind of silly. What you could do is just take their Android devices, plug them in your computer, hit the deploy button, and all of a sudden they have your app. Just no questions asked. Whereas opposed to with iOS, you'd have to set up their device on your account and link it, do all this crazy stuff. Here, it's just plug it in, deploy, and they have the app. And there's no limit to how many people you can do that for. So if you have a friend, too, who you owe a favor for, you can be like, oh, let me just give you one of my apps for free or something like that, which I think is kind of a cool aspect of that, just deploying directly on devices and it remaining there. So that's kind of another little perk of Android development. Seeing as how this viewer is terribly failing, I guess what we'll do is just talk a little bit about the rest of these interface elements here, and then just end the video, and then the next video I'll have a solution that works. I'll actually test it on screen or off screen before I start the video to make sure it works next time. It might just be a configuration setting with this thing. Maybe I can choose how fast it samples and make it not crash or something. I'm not quite sure. But let's just get into this. So we did create a blank activity, and it included this fragment main.xml with a relative layout, and it's telling us that. So it wants us to delete the text view and change relative to linear. It also wants us to specify an orientation. I'm not going to do that at the moment because the device is already in landscape mode, but let's do this. So let's go into the XML and just delete this right here, and you'll see if I come back over here to this tab, that word hello world exclamation point is no longer there because I've just deleted the text element. Now the next thing it wants us to do is make this a linear layout. So let's just come in here and make this a linear layout. And we're not going to see anything change at first because there's nothing inside of our linear layout. We're going to leave all this stuff the same. Match parent. What match parent does is basically say take up 100% of the width and height available. There's no padding on this example they've given us here, but this one actually does have padding. It also has a context. Honestly, I don't actually know what the context is, so that's part of the whole me learning with you guys, but I'm not going to worry about that now. I'm just going to leave it alone. But we will add this Android orientation. Let's just add it to be follow them. So you'll see when I hit this colon here, it actually has IntelliSense, so it's recommending options. So you type the first few letters and hit enter, and it fills it in for you. So now I can just type in landscape. Is that all it was? Oh, no, horizontal, my bad. Okay, so horizontal. Okay. Let's see what that looks like over here. Pretty much exactly the same. Saying horizontal is not a valid value. Did I misspell it? Horizontal. H-O-R-I-Z-O-N-T-A-O. Yep, I can't spell. Okay. That's like the story of my life. Actually, no, it's still saying no good. Let's save it and see if the error goes away. Yep, error goes away. Okay, so I can't type, guys. Now you know that. Okay, so it tells us a little bit about linear layout. It tells us it's a subclass of view group, which again, every layout is going to be a view group type. It's either vertical or horizontal. And so that horizontal, like I mentioned earlier, stacks it from side to side or vertical. So by putting horizontal, anything we stick inside of it is going to be laid out left to right. Width and height, like I mentioned, the match parent, just say fill up 100% of the available space. The next thing it wants us to do is create a text field. Not a text display, but a text field. So think of like a text box on a website that you can actually click on and edit. Again, this is a view object, so it has properties. So let's come down here and create, in fact, let's just copy this because, well, we have copy and paste, so why not use it? Paste that right there. The ID is edit message, again wrap content. So this is no longer filling up 100% of the width and height available. That would be silly because then you wouldn't have room for any other elements on your screen. It would be just one big text box. The hint is what shows up when nothing is typed in. So if the user just opens up the application and has the text box, excuse me, they will be able to see a little hint of what they should enter in that box. And wrap content, as I just said a second ago, just says take up all the width and height you need to fit the content, but no more. So this is on there, so let's come over here and let's save this and click on graphical layout and see what it looks like. So you'll see it's putting @string/edit_message because we don't have a string resource with that name, and that's what it's referencing here. So this is how you reference strings in your interface without actually typing in the hardcode string. Now I could, let's take this and put it right here. I could, interesting. Okay, let's just cut it. I was going to try and put a comment, but apparently I don't know what the comment symbol is in the code, and I'll figure that out for next video. But, oh, you know why? Okay, I can't change the ID. Well, I can, but that would be silly. I'm going to leave the ID the same. What I really need to do is come down here to this @string. This is the hint. So if I cut that out of there and just type in a manual string like test, or that's a bad one, let's say first name, something you might enter here, and come over and look at this, you'll see it's saying first name, but it's giving us a little warning because it's really saying we should be using the string resource, which we should. So let's delete this, put the string resource back in, and we're going to name it first_name. Let's come over here and under values, grab this strings.xml. And we're going to make a new one. We're going to call it first_name. I don't know why it's not letting us create it. Let's try this again. Add. Oh, okay, that was weird. It was just kind of bugging out last time. This list wasn't there. Okay, so first. Oh no, it goes away again. Why? String. Okay. Okay, well, apparently my editor is being buggy today. I don't know. Maybe that crash is caused because of my editor, not the other thing. But we're just going to come in here and do it in code because that's an option as well. So you'll see you create a string tag and then a closing string tag. And if any of you have done HTML and CSS before, I mean, there's a lot of parallels. Like these XML files are kind of like doing the HTML pages, and then it's also very similar in terms of separating layout and code. I mean, that's done in a lot of other programming languages, but that can be thought of as well here as if you were to have a JavaScript file and then your HTML file, right? So you have all your code is in the JavaScript, or in this case the Java file, and all your layout's done in the XML file. So we're going to say, please enter your name. Okay, let's come back over here now, and if we click on here, we've referenced this first name string which we just made, and now we see, please enter your name. So that's how you use string resources and reference them in code by using this @string/, and then you can put the name of the variable that you've made in this field right here. It's still not showing my thing over here. Yeah, that's weird. My editor's being weird today. And okay. Now the next thing is adding string resources, which I basically just went over. The next thing I want us to do is add a button. So let's go ahead and add a button in here. So come back to fragment, and this time we're just going to type it out. So button, and you'll see it kind of finishes some of the code for us there. It's very nice. Android ID @+ID /button1, which is a terrible ID name, but we're just going to leave it alone for now. Okay, and the next thing is, actually doesn't even ask us to set an ID, but I chose to. Now we need a layout with wrap content, and we need another text pointing to another variable. So let's be smart about this, and again use copy and paste, because why would you not use copy and paste? So we want wrap content, and we're going to name this button text. Now something else I want to specify here is that a lot of Android tutorials do what I'm doing right now, which is just kind of do button test, first name, things that are kind of cool but all very isolated, not very helpful independent. I mean, they're helpful independently, but they're not really app driven. But my goal here is to actually eventually get to the point where we can actually sit down and make an app from start to finish, and have several videos of me doing that, where I can just start from a blank slate, make a killer app during a video series, and then end by actually publishing it, so you guys can go and download it on your Android devices and actually see the fruit of what all that code does that will basically be documented on YouTube. But you know, you have to walk before you can run, you have to crawl before you can walk. So we're starting here with, you know, the super duper basics, but the nice thing about this is, you know, anyone can follow along. This is really driven for someone who has programming experience before, because I'm not really explaining too much of what the elements are, but up until this point we actually haven't done any Java code at all, and we won't in this first video, and so, you know, no need to worry about that. But once we get into the programming, I'm going to go over some of it, but you know, I'm going to probably expect you to have previous programming experiences. So there are tons of great videos on YouTube. I personally learned how to program on YouTube, and now actually do programming is on a contracting basis well in school. And so, you know, the lesson of that, I guess, is that YouTube is actually a wonderful platform to learn. And so I strongly suggest that if you're interested in learning the fundamentals of programming, you know, go to YouTube and look up videos. One thing to note about YouTube is that some videos are going to be better than others. Not all videos are created equal, and so but you have to take everything you learn on YouTube with a grain of salt, because you're going to learn some things that will work, but they're terrible hacky solutions, and then other things you will learn that are going to be great techniques. And so you just have to take everything you learn, like I said, with a grain of salt, and filter it out. And then what happens is you start learning more and more and more, you kind of learn that the things that are repeatedly done are the good things to do, and things that are not repeatedly done are the not so good things to do, programming wise. I mean, they're not going to, like, you know, you're not going to get in trouble for them. Well, you could have on a job, but you know, just playing around with it, you're not going to get in trouble for it. But you know, they're just not best practices. But like I said, if for programming fundamentals, this is probably not the best video or video series. So I would go to YouTube and look up other videos, and you know, also possibly get some books, because there are plenty of great books that can be gotten from either the library or, you know, pretty cheaply on Amazon about how to get into Java or really any other programming language. I actually learned Visual Basic first and Java second. And Java is actually a very easy language to pick up, so it's a pretty good one for people to start with. But the moral of all this is that this video series is primarily driven towards, well, Android development. And like I said, I'm not going to go into too much programming detail, but I am going to go to a very simple level on the Android, which is what I'm doing right here. Okay, so we've made our button, and we need to add button text to our string class. So let's come in here, and actually I'm going to paste that for now. Copy and paste this. One thing you will learn is that copy and paste is your best friend. It makes everything easier. Okay, let's just say press me, because it's going to be on the button itself. So let's come back over here and click on this. Okay, now you'll see it's done some funny text wrapping here because we've again done a horizontal layout, a horizontal linear layout, and it just is going to take up as much space as it needs. And this please enter your name, I believe there's actually a property to set in multi-lines, which don't quote me on that, we'll check that later. But I believe there's a property for multi-lines, which is why this, and it's not set right now, which is why this is taking up as much space as it needs horizontally and will not compress vertically, and this button is kind of being squished over here on the side. But we'll check that in 1 second. Let me actually just make a note of that. I don't want to forget anything. So check, what do I say here? Check text input width. Okay, this is just keep running notes during my video. Okay, so we've made our button, and make the input box fill the screen width. Now, incidentally, ours has kind of already done that because we've run out of screen width, but this is still an important thing here, so we're going to go ahead and cover this. Basically, each element has like a weight, and so that weight has to do with how much of the screen it takes up. So if you look here, weight of 1, if you give one object a weight of 1 and the other of 2, it's going to sum those two numbers and then put that number over that sum, and that's going to be the ratio of width it takes up. So in this case, if we gave our text box a width of 2 and the button 1, the text box would get 2/3 of the width and the button would only get 1/3 of the width. Same thing if you were to add 4 individual weights of 1 and so forth. The default weight is 0, and so it just fills whatever space remains, and elements are given the space they require. But as you've seen so far, that gives a little bit of a weird effect where it can very easily be overrun and squished over like that. So edit text here, it's telling to give a weight of 1, and the button will have no weight, which means everything else will actually let's come check this for a second. So to fill the remaining space with the edit text element, give it a weight of 1. So what that means is the button's going to take up its space, and then the edit text is going to fill everything else. Now this may not work right given that we're already out of space, but let's try this. So let's come in here and do Android weight. Might be layout weight. Yeah, layout weight. Okay, let's give it 1. Let's see what that does. Okay, so it's actually compressed this to multiple lines. However, it's saying using a layout width of 0 dip instead of wrap content for better performance. So this is actually a suggestion they're giving us, so that's something we could change. But this actually fixes the multi-line issue. So I mentioned earlier about checking that property on the input, and we still will in a minute, but really the better answer is you probably shouldn't be laying things out without a weight. Give everything a weight, and then that way you know how much space they're taking up. It actually tells you here, set layout width to 0 dp, which is the same thing that their editor is recommending us to do. Let's see if it tells us why to do that. In order to improve the layout efficiency, you should specify the width of edit text to be 0. Improves layout forms because wrap content requires the system to calculate, but it's irrelevant. So basically that's saying is if you put wrap content behind the scenes, your device is going to do some math. But if you set 0 dp, it's not going to do any math, it's just going to make it 0. And since the weight is already being defined, we don't need to actually set a width because it's going to be completely ignored, and its weight is going to be used to calculate the width. So that's why 0 dp should be set. So let's come in here and do that. So set a width on fragment.xml of 0 dp. And see, it's even highlighting in yellow and telling us this hint here. So they make it very easy and very friendly, in my opinion, DIP, okay, to write code and do layouts. They do a pretty good job. I mean, this training series is absolutely wonderful, and so if you decide that the pace of this video is not good for you, you've already done some Android apps, you know, you no need to watch my videos, just come in here and read this and do it at your own pace. But and then you can skip to later videos that I'm going to do in the future where we actually build full apps. Okay, so this is telling us what it looks like, and we have basically all the same code written in ours. Obviously we have some other layout oddities because our text, the hint we gave and the button text we gave are long enough that they're overrunning each other. So we're going to play around with that right about now. But at this point we have finished their tutorial. I'm not going to delete this, I'm going to save it, and in next video, once I figure out how to actually get this thing working without crashing, I will show you what this app looks like. But for this video I'm not going to be able to show it, unfortunately, because that app crashes, or that screen recording app for my Android device actually crashes my deployed apps. Okay, so this is what we have, and now we need to go look up if there's a multi-line property for the text edit. I said text input, but it's called edit text. So this is where, coming over here, and we finished this building a simple interface, so let's come over here to reference. It might be under API guides, I'm not sure. Let's do Android dot, no, okay, so it's not under here. So let's do user interface, input controls, and text fields. No, that's not what we want. It might be what we want, I'm not quite sure. Oh, edit text, here we go. Okay, it is what we want. Let's see if this gives us a list of all the properties, or if we need to go look it up in the other API. Let's come up here for a second and click edit text, and it'll take us to where the actual code is. Okay, so this is the code behind the edit text view, and again, this is all done in actual Java. So let's come in here and view all the parameters. So we don't really care about constructors, and we don't really, okay, this may not be what we're looking for, because it would appear as though this is giving us how to interact with it from the code, but not what properties are available. Let's try this one more time. Let's go back into user interface, input controls, and text fields. It's actually telling you can specify an input type. So if you do email address, it'll specifically change this keyboard that has the @ symbol. Some other cool stuff. These are the ones you can do: text, email address, URL, number, so it actually gives you a keypad, and then phone. Input type has to do, okay, here we go, input type. So allows bitwise combinations, so you can specify what the keyboard layout and one or more behaviors at the same time. Okay, that's interesting. So what that looks like, what you can do then is you can specify things like capitalizing new words and autocomplete. And this bitwise is just talking about, it looks like you can specify a keyboard layout and other behaviors all in one variable there, so that's interesting. I'm not going to get into that too much now. So these are some of the common values. Okay, so yes, they do have a text multi-line, so let's read this. Normal text keyboard that allows user to input long string of text that include line breaks. Okay, so if you set input type, so if you go in here and add the input type text multi-line to it, it will allow you to add multiple lines to it. So let's come try that out and see if that's what we were looking for. So it looks like it's Android : input type. So let's actually just grab this and we'll just modify it. Okay, so let's come right here and just put this. Now we don't need more than one, so we're going to get rid of those pipe characters. What they're called is the one above your backslash on the keyboard, and you have to hold shift and hit backslash and you'll get that. It's called a pipe character, and it's used for the bitwise OR in this case. That's what they were talking about. So let's come grab this text multi-line and put this right here, and let's go ahead and go look at our layout and see if it's changed now. It actually hasn't changed the layout, but that's something we're going to have to play with in the next video once I deploy it to see if it actually behaves any differently. But the answer to that question is you can make a multi-line text layout, and it's by putting that parameter in there. We're going to minimize this for a second, come back in here and play with this. You can also play with this kind of just by hitting enter, Android, and it'll pop up with all the things available, which is a ton. You can set font family, all kinds of stuff. Let's see if there's another. So they actually do have a number of minimum lines and max lines and lines. So make the text view be exactly this many lines tall. So let's do this. Let's make it 4 lines tall. Let's see if that changes our view. It certainly does. So now you'll see we have 4 lines, and this please enter your name is actually in the middle too, centered. So again, we'll play with more about what that looks like in the next video once I can actually deploy some stuff, but that takes care of that note, so we'll go ahead and close out of that. And that's pretty much that. Now let's see, I quickly closed out of this. I don't actually know, did this training tutorial actually cover how to add an event to the button? Let's go here and find out. Building a simple user interface. I don't think it did. No, it didn't. So correct. So if you were to deploy this and hit the button, it would do absolutely nothing at the moment, which is just wonderful. Not very helpful, but still you would be able to see it, which is something. This starting another activity is where you can actually make that button do something, I believe, and it builds among the previous one. But we're going to wait to do that until I can figure out how to get this viewer to work, because I really do need to be able to show you what the apps are doing, because the code and the layout's only 50% of the picture. Actually seeing it work is a kind of cool thing. So I'm just going to close out of that and close out of this. And that concludes my first tutorial. You guys need to let me know how you like these. If you like them, my plan is to keep doing them and go through all the training tutorials, really. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Please like, subscribe, and tell your friends. Thanks. Bye.